Hello. Today I'm going to read the next chapter of The Little People. The last chapter we read, today is chapter 9. So last time was chapter 8. And I asked you some questions on chapter 8. Let's see how you got on. The questions were, number 1, who saw Arrietty? Question 2 was, how old is he? And question number 3, what was the boy going to run indoors and get? The answers. First one was, Arrietty was seen by the boy. Okay. And question number 2, how old is he? He's 10 years old. Tells Arrietty he's 10. And number 3, he runs indoors to get a book. Okay, because he wants Arrietty to read to him. Because he can read a bit, but not very much. Excuse me. So yeah, just to recap from last time, Arrietty has been seen by the boy. And they talk together, and Arrietty learns some things about big people, the human beings, as the borrowers call them. The boy asks Arrietty lots of questions about her family and where they live, and she tells him all about herself. Okay, so chapter 9, here we go. So Arrietty told him about borrowing, how difficult it was and how dangerous. She told him about the storerooms under the floor, about Pod's early exploits, the skill he'd shown and the courage. She described those far-off days before her birth, when Pod and Homily had been rich. She, the boy realised gradually, when Arrietty talked about her, was his great-aunt Sophie upstairs. He heard how Pod would borrow from her bedroom, picking his way in the firelight among the trinkets on her dressing table, even climbing her bed curtains and walking on her quilt, and how she would watch him and sometimes talk to him, because she thinks my father comes out of the bottle, said Arrietty. And one day when I'm older, he's going to take me there, and she'll think I came out of the bottle too. It'll please her, my father thinks, as she's used to him now. Once he took my mother, and Aunt Sophie perked up like anything and kept asking why my mother didn't come any more. Because once, she says, she saw a little man and a little woman, and now she only sees a little man. I wish she thought I came out of the bottle, said the boy. She gives me dictation and teaches me to write. I only see her in the mornings when she's cross. She sends for me and looks behind my ears and asks Mrs. D if I've learned my words. What does Mrs. D look like? Asked Arrietty. How delicious it was to say Mrs. D like that. How careless and daring. She's fat and has a moustache and gives me my bath and hurts my bruise and my sore elbow, and she says she'll take a slipper to me one of these days. The boy pulled up a tuft of grass and stared at it angrily, and Arrietty saw his lip tremble. My mother's very nice, he said. She lives in India. Why did you lose all your worldly riches? Well, said Arrietty, the kitchen boiler burst, and hot water came pouring through the floor into our house, and everything was washed away and piled up in front of the grating. My father worked night and day, first hot, then cold, trying to salvage things. And there's a dreadful draught in March through that grating. He got ill, you see, and couldn't go borrowing, so my Uncle Hen Drury had to do it, and one or two others, and my mother gave them things bit by bit for all their trouble. But the kingfisher bird was spoilt by the water. All its feathers fell off, and a great twirly spring came jumping out of its side. My father used the spring to keep the door shut against draughts from the grating, and my mother put the feathers in a little moleskin hat. After a while I got born and my father went borrowing again, but he gets tired now and doesn't like curtains, not when any of the bubbles are off. Excuse me a moment. helped him a bit, said the boy, with the teacup. He was shivering all over. I suppose he was frightened. My father frightened? Exclaimed Arrietty angrily. Frightened of you, she added. Perhaps he doesn't like heights, said the boy. He loves heights, said Arrietty. The thing he doesn't like is curtains. I've told you, curtains make him tired. The boy sat thoughtfully on his haunches, chewing a blade of grass. Borrowing, he said after a while. Is that what you call it? What else could you call it? Asked Arrietty. I'd call it stealing. Arrietty laughed. She really laughed. but we are borrowers, she explained, like you're a human being or whatever it's called. We're part of the house. You might as well say that the fire grate steals the coal from the coal scuttle. Then what is stealing? Arrietty looked grave. Supposing my Uncle Henry borrowed an emerald watch from her dressing table, and my father took it and hung it up on our wall. That's stealing. An emerald watch? Exclaimed the boy. Well, I just said that because we have one on the wall at home, but my father borrowed it himself. It needn't be a watch. It could be anything, a lump of sugar even. But borrowers don't steal. Except from human beings, said the boy. Arrietty burst out laughing. She laughed so much that she had to hide her face in the primrose. Oh dear, she gasped with tears in her eyes. You are funny. She stared upwards at his puzzled face. Human beings are for borrowers, like bread for butter. The boy was silent a while. A sigh of wind rustled the cherry tree and shivered among the blossom. Well, I don't believe it, he said at last, watching the falling petals. I don't believe that's what we're here for at all. And I don't believe we're dying out. Oh, goodness, exclaimed Arrietty impatiently, staring up at his chin. Just use your common sense. You're the only real human being I ever saw, although I do just know of 3 more, Prampful, her and Mrs. Driver. But I know lots and lots of borrowers. The overmantels and the harpsichords and the rain barrels and the linen presses and the boot racks and the Honourable John Studdingtons and... He looked down. John Studdington? But he was our granduncle. Well, this family lived behind a picture, went on Arrietty, hardly listening. And there were the stovepipes and the bell pulls and the... Yes, he interrupted, but did you see them? I saw the harpsichords, and my mother was a bell pull. The others were before I was born. He leaned closer. Then where are they now? Tell me that. My Uncle Henry has a house in the country, said Arrietty coldly, edging away from his great lowering face. It was misted over, she noticed, with hairs of palest gold. And 5 children, harpsichords and clocks. But where are all the others? Oh, said Arrietty, they're somewhere. But where? She wondered. And she shivered slightly in the boy's cold shadow, which lay about her, slantwise on the grass. He drew back again, his fair head blocking out a great piece of sky. Well, he said deliberately after a moment, and his eyes were cold, I've only seen 2 borrowers, but I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and... Oh, no, whispered Arrietty, of human beings. And he sat back. Arrietty stood very still. She did not look at him. After a while she said, I don't believe you. All right, he said. Then I'll tell you. I still won't believe you, murmured Arrietty. Listen, he said. And he told her about railway stations and football matches and race courses and royal processions and Albert Hall concerts. He told her about India and China and North America and the British Commonwealth. He told her about the July sales. Not hundreds, he said, but thousands and millions and billions and trillions of great, big, enormous people. Now do you believe me? Arrietty stared up at him with frightened eyes. He gave her a crick in the neck. I don't know, she whispered. As for you, he went on, leaning closer again, I don't believe that there are any more borrowers anywhere in the world. I believe you're the last 3, he said. Arrietty dropped her face into the primrose. We're not. There's Aunt Loopy and Uncle Hendry and the cousins. I bet they're dead, said the boy. And what's more, he went on, no one will ever believe I've seen you, and you'll be the very last because you're the youngest. One day, he told her, smiling triumphantly, you'll be the only borrower left in the world. He sat still, waiting, but she did not look up. Oh, now you're crying, he remarked after a moment. You're not dead, said Arrietty in a muffled voice. She was feeling in her little pocket for a handkerchief. They live in a badger set 2 fields away, beyond the spinney. We don't see them because it's too far. There are weasels and things, and cows and foxes and crows. Which spinney? He asked. I don't know, Arrietty almost shouted. It's along by the gas pipe, a field called Parkins Beck. She blew her nose. I'm going home, she said. Don't go, he said. Not yet. Yes, I'm going, said Arrietty. His face turned pink. Just let me get the book, he pleaded. I'm not going to read to you now, said Arrietty. Why not? She looked at him with angry eyes. Because. Listen, he said. I'll go to that field. I'll go and find Uncle Hendry and the cousins and Aunt whatever she is, and if they're alive, I'll tell you. What about that? You could write them a letter and I'd put it down the hole. Arrietty gazed up at him. Would you? She breathed. Yes, I would. Really, I would. Now can I go and get the book? I'll go in by the side door. All right, said Arrietty absently. Her eyes were shining. When can I give you the letter? Any time, he said, standing above her. Where in the house do you live? Well, began Arrietty and stopped. Why, once again did she feel this chill. Could it only be his shadow towering above her, blotting out the sun? I'll put it somewhere, she said hurriedly. I'll put it under the hall mat. Which one? The one by the front door? Yes, that one. He was gone, and she stood there alone in the sunshine, shoulder deep in the grass. What had happened seemed too big for thought. She felt unable to believe it really had happened. Not only had she been seen, but she had been taught to. Not only been taught to, but she had... Arrietty, said a voice. She stood up, startled, and spun round. There was Pod, moon-faced, on the path, looking up at her. Come on down, he whispered. She stared at him for a moment, as though she did not recognise him. How round his face was, how kind, how familiar. Come on, he said urgently. And obediently, because he sounded worried, she slithered quickly towards him off the bank, balancing her primrose. Put that thing down, he said sharply when she stood at last beside him on the path. You can't lug great flowers about. You've got to carry a bag. What do you want to go up there for? He grumbled as they moved off across the stones. I might never have seen you. Hurry up now. Your mother will have tea waiting. So, that's the end of that chapter. So the questions for this week. First question is, where did Arrietty say she would leave her letter? So she's going to write a letter to Uncle Hendry. The boy's going to put it down the badger set. And so where did she say she was going to leave the letter? Where does Great Aunt Sophie think Pod comes out of? That's question number 2. Do you remember Great Aunt Sophie in her bed? Sometimes she talks to Pod, and she thinks Pod comes out of somewhere. And then, question number 3, where does Uncle Hendry live? Okay, good luck with the questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.